I first noticed something was wrong with my house when the hallway stretched an extra 5 feet overnight. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was just tired, maybe my sense of space was off. But when I measured it the next morning, using an old tape measure I found in the junk drawer, the numbers confirmed it. The hallway was longer than it had been before. I told myself it was a trick of perspective. Maybe I'd never really paid attention to it before. But then the doors changed. One night, heading to the bathroom, I reached for the handle and found it locked. Confused, I turned to the bedroom door, only to realize that it had swapped places with the bathroom entirely. The realization sent a cold wave through me. I had lived in this house for 3 years. I knew where the doors were. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had just been half asleep. Maybe I'd misremembered. But when I stepped into my bedroom, something else caught my eye. There was a door that hadn't been there before. It stood at the far end of the room, flush against the wall where my bookshelf used to be. The bookshelf was gone, as if it had never existed. The new door was identical to the others in my house, white, plain, with a brass doorknob. But I knew, deep in my gut, that it shouldn't be there. I didn't touch it that night. Instead, I lay in bed, staring at it in the dark. I expected to hear something from the other side. Breathing, whispering, movement. But there was nothing. Just silence. The next morning, the door was still there. The bookshelf was still gone. I grabbed my phone to take a picture, but the screen flickered and went black before I could open the camera. My whole body tensed. I rebooted the phone, but the battery had drained completely. It had been at 80% when I woke up. I decided to leave for the day to get out of the house. Maybe I was going stir-crazy. Maybe all of this was stress. But when I stepped outside, my street looked different. Subtle changes. Houses with slightly different colors. Mailboxes in different places. The world felt off, as if I had stepped into a version of my neighborhood that wasn't quite right. Shaking it off, I went to work. But the feeling didn't fade. That night, I hesitated before stepping back inside. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I couldn't shake the wrongness of it. And then, as I walked down the hall toward my bedroom, I saw it. Another new door. This one was at the end of the hallway, past where the walls should have ended. My stomach tightened. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stepped closer, and I swear I heard something move on the other side. I didn't sleep that night. The door at the end of the hallway felt like a wound in the house. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that let in things that didn't belong. I sat in my bed, facing the bedroom door, listening. The house was silent. But silence, I realized, could be worse than sound. At some point, exhaustion won out. I woke up to sunlight bleeding through my curtains, my body stiff from staying in the same position all night. The first thing I did was check the hallway. The door was still there. I expected it to be gone, to be part of some strange dream or hallucination, but it stood at the end of the stretching corridor, waiting. I decided I wasn't going to touch it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as I turned away, I saw something else. My bedroom window. It should have faced the backyard. Instead, it looked out onto a street I didn't recognize. The houses were different, taller, with narrow, jagged roofs. The sky was a dull, washed-out gray, and the trees lining the sidewalk were twisted, as if bent backward by some unseen force. A man stood on the sidewalk, staring up at my window. I stepped back. My breath hitched in my throat. His face was obscured by shadow, but he didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, watching. I shut the curtains, heart pounding. Something was very, very wrong with this house. I needed to leave. I grabbed my bag and my keys, not even bothering to change out of my pajamas. But the moment I reached the front door, I hesitated. What if I stepped outside and it wasn't my neighborhood anymore? What if I walked out and found myself in the world beyond the window? I gritted my teeth, turned the knob, and pulled the door open. My stomach dropped. The street outside was the same as what I had seen through the window. Tall, unfamiliar houses, twisted trees, the dull gray sky, and the man. He was standing right in front of my house now, close enough that I could see his face. Only he didn't have one. His skin was smooth, featureless. No eyes, no mouth. Just a blank, pale oval. And yet, I knew he was looking at me. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly that the keys almost slipped from my grasp. I stumbled back, my breath coming fast and shallow. Then, a knock. Soft, deliberate, coming from the hallway door. The new one. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs. Another knock. And then, the doorknob started to turn. The doorknob turned slowly, deliberately. My pulse pounded so hard I thought my ribs might crack. I stepped backward, but the house felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in. Then the door clicked open. Darkness gaped beyond the threshold. Not just darkness, absence. No walls, no floor. Just a yawning black void. And yet, something moved within it. A shape, copy of me. It stood just beyond the door, shrouded in shadow, its head tilted in a way that wasn't quite human. I couldn't see its face. It was watching, waiting. I tried to breathe, tried to make sense of it, but then I noticed something worse. Behind it, more doors. An impossible hallway stretched beyond, lined with identical doors, some open, some shut. Beyond each one, I glimpsed rooms from my house. My bedroom, my kitchen, my living room, but they weren't right. Some were inverted, others too big or too small. Some were just wrong. And in some of them I saw myself. Sleeping, eating, standing at the window. Each version of me was unaware, trapped in their own space. Then my copy, the one closest, stepped forward. I saw its face then. It was mine, but stretched, distorted. Its eyes were too large, its smile too wide, like something that had studied me for too long, trying to get it right but failing. Its lips moved. At first there was no sound. Then a whisper. "You don't belong here." I stumbled backward, my head spinning. The air in the room had changed, heavier, charged, as if the house itself was waiting. I didn't wait. I grabbed the door, ready to slam it shut, but the moment my fingers touched the wood, the hallway beyond shifted. The doors rearranged. And suddenly, I wasn't standing in my house anymore. I was inside one of the other versions. The door behind me was gone. The air smelled stale, like something long abandoned. The furniture was covered in sheets. The walls were yellowed, peeling. A clock on the far wall ticked loudly, the hands moving backward. And then I heard it. Footsteps, coming from above. Slow, heavy, pacing just over my head. I turned, searching for a way out, but the room wasn't mine. The layout had changed. The windows were bricked over. The front door was missing. And the footsteps, they were coming down the stairs. I wasn't alone in this version of the house. I wasn't alone at all. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Each step creaked, the sound filling the suffocating silence of the unfamiliar house. My breath came in shallow gasps as I backed toward the farthest wall, my fingers searching for something, anything, solid to hold on to. Then I saw it. The staircase. It was different from mine. It twisted in a way that defied logic, spiraling up into a darkened second floor that shouldn't exist. Shadows clung to the walls like something alive, stretching as the unseen figure descended. And then, a leg, pale, too thin, moving stiffly, like a puppet on half-cut strings. Another step. Then a hand gripped the railing. The fingers were wrong. Too long, the knuckles bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I couldn't see its face yet, and I didn't want to. I moved, fast. I sprinted for the nearest door, ignoring the way the walls seemed to breathe, warping as I passed. My hand closed around the knob just as I heard it move again. Quicker now, coming for me. I yanked the door open and slammed it behind me, locking it on instinct. Silence. For a second, I thought it had stopped. Then, a whisper, too close to the other side of the door. "You're in the wrong house." My stomach twisted into knots. The voice, it was mine. I stumbled backward. The room I had entered was familiar, but only barely. It was my living room, but aged, as if abandoned for years. The walls were cracked, the couch covered in dust. A television sat in the corner, its screen turned off, but faint static crackled from the speakers. I turned toward the window. My breath caught in my throat. The man with no face was there. Closer this time. He stood just beyond the glass, featureless head tilted slightly, as if studying me. My chest tightened with pure, numbing terror. Then, his hand lifted, and he pointed. Not at me. At something behind me. Cold fear poured down my spine. I turned, slowly, my body refusing to obey. The television screen had turned on, and on it I saw myself, standing in a hallway that wasn't mine, staring at a door that shouldn't exist. The screen flickered. A hand gripped my shoulder in the reflection. But in real life, nothing was there. I ran. I didn't know where, I didn't care. I threw open another door, any door, and found myself in another hallway. This one narrow and stretching into a dim, endless corridor. The walls pulsed. The air hummed. My own breathing was deafening in my ears. Footsteps. Behind me. Too many. Too fast. I didn't look. I ran deeper into the house. I ran. The hallway stretched, twisting as I moved, the walls bending like something alive. Doors lined both sides, some slightly open, others sealed shut. The air was thick, oppressive, like the house itself was pressing in on me. Behind me, the footsteps never stopped. They didn't rush, didn't panic. They followed with purpose, closing the distance inch by inch. I reached the end of the corridor. A door loomed before me, its surface warped, the brass knob cold beneath my shaking hand. I hesitated. Then, behind me, a whisper. Wrong way. I turned. The hallway was empty. The doors had vanished. The walls had smoothed into seamless, pale surfaces, stretching infinitely in both directions. The only thing left was me, standing in a space that shouldn't exist. And the whisper hadn't come from behind me. It had come from inside the walls. I backed up against the door. My own heartbeat was a frantic drum in my ears. I needed to get out. I turned the knob and stepped into my house. My real house. Everything was back. The furniture, the windows, the familiar scent of old wood and dust. Morning light streamed through the blinds. The air was still, undisturbed. I stood there, frozen, my mind struggling to understand. Had I imagined it? Had I been sleepwalking? I turned toward the hallway. It was normal. No stretching walls, no endless doors. I exhaled a shaky breath. Maybe I had lost time. Maybe I had dreamt the entire thing. But as I moved toward the kitchen, something caught my eye. A door. A new door. Right where the old one had been. My stomach twisted. I approached slowly, my fingers hovering over the knob. The surface of the door looked identical to the rest, but something was wrong. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then, a voice. My own. You made it back. But I didn't. My breath stopped. I stumbled away, heart slamming against my ribs. The knob twisted. I turned and ran. This was still the wrong house. I ran for the front door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My fingers fumbled against the lock, slick with sweat, but I managed to twist it open. I yanked the door wide, and froze. The street outside was not mine. The sky hung low, thick with swirling gray clouds that moved too fast. The houses stood at strange angles, stretched like melting wax. The trees were twisted knots of blackened wood, their branches clawing toward the sky. And in the middle of the street, facing my house, were dozens of them, faceless figures, standing still, watching. I slammed the door shut so hard the walls shook. My entire body trembled. My mind screamed at me to wake up, to fix this, but the house pulsed around me like a living thing. The air was thick with something unseen, something aware. A creak. The door behind me, the new door, was opening. I spun around. My breath hitched. I saw myself, not the stretched, distorted thing from before. This time it was exactly me. Same clothes, same trembling stance, same terror in its wide eyes. It stepped into the room, its movements slow, uncertain. Please, it whispered, voice identical to mine. You have to take my place. I backed away. What are you talking about? Someone always has to stay. Its voice cracked. I was here before you. I was the last one to escape. But you opened the door. You let it shift. Now it needs someone new. I shook my head. No. No, It lunged. I stumbled backward, hitting the front door. It grabbed my wrist, cold fingers too real, too solid. You have to stay, it shrieked. I shoved it away. It staggered, but then its face. My face. Twisted with something desperate. The walls around us shifted. The faceless figures pressed against the windows now, their blank heads tilting in eerie unison. The house groaned, its floors shuddering. And the new door, it was pulling me toward it. A force wrapped around my limbs, dragging me backward. My copy lunged again, fingers clawing at me. I fought, kicked, screamed. But the door loomed wider, impossibly deep, an endless void opening beyond it. I caught a final glimpse of my doppelganger, standing still now, breathing hard. Then, the door slammed shut. Silence. Darkness. I woke up on my couch. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The air was still. My heart pounded against my ribs as I sat up, my hands shaking. Everything looked normal. But I knew. I wasn't in the same house anymore. I ran to the front door, opened it. The street was normal. My neighborhood, my sky, my trees. But something was different. The air smelled wrong. The house next door, it wasn't the right color. The tree in my yard, shorter than before. My reflection in the hallway mirror, half a second too slow to move. And then, from somewhere deep inside the house, a door creaked open. The house had shifted again. And this time, there was no way back. The house was perfect. A little too perfect. It was an old Victorian, sitting at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of place that should have cost twice as much. But the price was absurdly low. I figured it was a steal. Maybe the owner was desperate, maybe there was some hidden structural issue. But when I asked the realtor, she only gave me a tight-lipped smile. It's been on the market a long time, she said. I should have pressed her. I should have asked why. But I signed the papers instead. The first few weeks were normal. The house had its quirks. The floors creaked like old bones. The walls carried whispers of past tenants in the form of faint stains and scratches. But it was charming. It was mine. Then, one night, I found the basement door unlocked. I was sure I had locked it before. Positive. I had even bought a heavy-duty padlock just to be safe. But when I checked, the lock was gone. Not broken, not on the floor. Gone. As if it had never been there. The air in the basement was thick. Dust swirled in the dim light as I stepped down. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Rats? Mold? Instead, I found boxes. Old, worn, shoved against the far wall. I hadn't put them there. I knelt and opened one. Inside were keys. Dozens of them. Rusted, old-fashioned keys, piled haphazardly. My fingers dug deeper and I found wallets. Passports. Each one had a different name, different faces, different lives. And all of them had the same address. My house. A chill slithered down my spine. I grabbed one of the passports, flipping through it with shaking hands. The last stamp was from 10 years ago. Had someone lived here before me? Had they left in a hurry? Or had they never left at all? A creak sounded behind me. I turned. The basement door was closed. I ran up the stairs, yanking at the handle. It didn't budge. My breath came fast, my pulse hammering in my throat. Then, from the other side of the door, a soft click. The sound of a lock sliding into place. And then, footsteps. Slow. Coming down the stairs toward me. The footsteps were deliberate. Slow. Measured. Something was coming down the basement stairs. I pressed myself against the door, my breath shallow, my fingers fumbling for a way out. But the handle wouldn't turn. The lock was outside. I wasn't trapped in my basement. I was locked in. The air thickened, carrying the scent of dust and something rotten. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a whisper. Low. Raspy. Not yet. My blood turned to ice. I spun around, my eyes darting across the basement, looking for another way out. There was a small window near the ceiling, too high to reach. The air vent, too narrow. The shelves, too weak. My gaze landed on the boxes. I dug through them frantically, my hands shoving aside old wallets, faded IDs, car keys that no longer had an owner. Then my fingers hit something solid. A hammer. I grabbed it just as the whisper came again. Closer this time. Not yet. I didn't think. I just swung. The hammer smashed into the door, splintering the wood. I hit it again, and again. Each impact echoed, rattling through the basement like a gunshot. Behind me, the whisper laughed. I didn't stop. The wood cracked. I reached through, yanking at the broken pieces, pulling apart the splintered edges. My fingers bled, but I didn't care. Then, hands. Pale hands reached through the hole from the other side. But they weren't mine. They clawed at me, long fingers stretching unnaturally, nails scraping against my skin. I screamed and swung the hammer again, hitting one of the hands. The thing jerked back, a sickening crunch echoing through the house. The lock clicked. The door swung open on its own. I didn't wait. I bolted out, slamming it shut behind me. My breath came fast, my chest heaving. My shaking fingers fumbled with the padlock. I had to lock it, had to make sure that thing didn't follow me up. But the padlock was back on the floor, right where I had left it, like it had never disappeared, like the house was playing with me. I locked the basement. I pushed a chair against it, then a table, then whatever furniture I could find. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't sleep that night, but the house did, and in the silence, it breathed. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, hammer still clutched in my hands, staring at the basement door. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it was waiting for me to let my guard down. At some point, exhaustion won. My head drooped forward, just for a second, a thump from the basement. I jolted awake, every muscle tensing. Silence. Then, thump, slow, rhythmic, like something pounding against the other side of the door. I gripped the hammer tighter, my breath coming in shallow gasps. It wasn't possible. I had locked the door. I had blocked it. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The chair. The table. Everything I had pushed against the door. It was gone. Not knocked over. Not pushed aside. Just gone. As if I had never barricaded it at all. Thump. I stepped backward. My mind screamed at me to leave, to get out of the house, to run and never look back. But then I heard it. A voice. Muffled. Warped. It was my own voice. Let me out. I turned and ran. I grabbed my keys, yanked the front door open, and practically threw myself outside. The air was sharp, cold, real. The night was empty, silent. The street looked normal, houses lined up neatly, streetlights humming. I didn't look back. I got in my car and started driving. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to get away. I made it 3 blocks before I realized something was wrong. The street didn't end. I checked my rearview mirror. The house was still behind me. I pressed the gas pedal. My heart pounded. I took random turns, sped down empty roads, searching for a highway, a landmark, something familiar. But every time I checked my mirrors, the house was always there, waiting, watching, like I had never left. I slammed the brakes, my hands shaking. My breath came fast, ragged. I turned off the engine. This wasn't real. Couldn't be. Then, from the passenger seat, a whisper. You should have stayed inside. I turned. The seat was empty. But the house was closer now. I wasn't in my car anymore. I was back inside the house. I don't remember turning around. I don't remember opening the door. But somehow, I was standing in my living room. The hammer was still in my hand. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The basement door stood in front of me, slightly open. I had locked it. I had locked it. A whisper crawled up from the dark. You're home. My knees nearly buckled. My vision swam. My mind was screaming that this wasn't happening. But my body knew the truth. I was trapped. The house wasn't letting me go. The only way out was through the basement. I didn't want to. Every nerve in my body begged me not to. But something deep inside whispered back. Something quiet, something not mine. You left the others down there. I swallowed hard. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that the house wanted me to see something. I stepped forward. The stairs groaned beneath my weight. The air was thick, almost solid, pressing against my skin. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs breathed. I reached the last step. The basement had changed. The walls stretched too far, disappearing into an impossible darkness. The ceiling loomed higher than it should have. The air smelled of dust and rot. And all around me, doors, lining the walls, dozens of them. Old wooden, covered in scratches. Some were cracked open just enough to show a sliver of blackness. Others were nailed shut. Then I saw it. One door stood different from the others. Newer, cleaner, and it had my name carved into it. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. My feet refused to move. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to see. But the house wanted me to. The doorknob was warm under my fingers. My name, carved deep into the wood, felt fresh, like it had been made just before I arrived. I turned the handle. The door swung open, and inside, I saw myself, huddled in the dark, eyes wide, lips cracked and muttering. My own face, gaunt, sunken, like I had been trapped down here for years. My other self looked up at me and smiled. Finally, the lights went out. I felt hands grab me, pulling me in. The door slammed shut. Darkness. And then, I woke up. On the floor of the basement. The hammer was gone. The boxes were gone. The doors were gone. The basement was normal again. But something was wrong. I ran upstairs, my breath shaking. The house was still mine. Everything looked the same. But when I went to the bathroom, when I looked into the mirror, the reflection wasn't me. Not quite. The eyes were different. Sunken. Watching me. And then, smiled. I stumbled back. My breath caught in my throat. From the basement, a whisper. You took my place. The house had its new owner. And now, it was waiting for the next one. I hadn't seen my childhood home in 20 years. Not since we left in a hurry. I never knew why. My parents never talked about it, and I was too young to ask the right questions. One night, we packed our things and never looked back. The house was sold to someone else and life moved on. Until now. I saw the listing online by accident. For sale, historic family home. My family home. The pictures looked exactly how I remembered. Same pale blue walls, same wraparound porch, even the same mailbox with the dent in it. It shouldn't have still been there. But it was. Curiosity pulled me in. I wasn't planning to buy it, just to see it one last time. Private showing, a walk through my past. The moment I stepped inside, a chill ran through me. Everything was the same. I don't mean the layout, the floors, or the walls. I mean everything. The furniture. The old leather couch my father loved. The wooden dining table, complete with scratches we made as kids. Even the family photos. My breath hitched. My childhood face stared back at me from the hallway wall. A photo that shouldn't be there. A photo that we took with our own camera, in a house we had left decades ago. I swallowed hard and stepped deeper inside. The air smelled like old wood and dust, but underneath it was something else. Something familiar. The scent of my mother's lavender candles, long gone. The faint trace of my father's aftershave. Like the house had been waiting for me. I ran my fingers over the dining table. The grooves were still there. My initials carved when I was 7. The dent in the wall where my brother threw a baseball too hard. I reached the kitchen. A teacup sat on the counter. Still warm. Prickle crawled up my spine. Someone had just been here. I turned to the realtor. Who owns this house? She frowned. No one. It's been vacant for years. My mouth went dry. I looked around again. The dust. The stillness. The warm cup of tea. The realtor checked her watch. I'll give you some time alone. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. Silence. I took a slow breath and turned back to the hallway. The photo was different now. The little boy me was sitting at the kitchen table. And behind him stood a shadow. I didn't hear the door close. But I knew. I wasn't alone in the house. I stared at the photo, my skin crawling. It had changed. I knew it had changed. In the picture, I sat at the kitchen table, my childhood self frozen in time. And behind me, in the shadows, something stood watching. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. The figure wasn't clear. Just an outline, a smudge in the darkness. But I felt it, a familiar weight in the air, presence I couldn't name. Then, a soft creak behind me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. The house was silent. But it wasn't the kind of silence you find in an empty space. It was a waiting silence, the kind that follows you. I forced myself to breathe. You're imagining things. The house is old, the photos are just tricks of the light. Then why was the tea still warm? I walked into the kitchen again. The cup sat where I'd left it. My fingertips hovered over it. The heat was fading now, but it had been fresh when I arrived. Someone had been here. Or maybe someone still was. I turned to the staircase. My old bedroom was upstairs. I should have left. I wanted to leave, but something pulled me forward. An old instinct, like the house was waiting for me to come home. My feet moved before I could stop them. The stairs groaned under my weight, the wood remembering every step. The hallway at the top stretched long and dim, the air cooler than before. My bedroom door stood at the end, closed. I hadn't closed it. A tightness coiled in my chest. I reached for the knob, fingers trembling. The door swung open on its own. I froze. The room was exactly the same twin bed, the same bookshelves, the same blue curtains I used to hide behind as a child. Even the same stuffed bear, sitting neatly on the pillow, like I had never left, like I had just gone downstairs for a moment. Then I saw the closet door, slightly open. My pulse pounded. That door had always been broken. It would swing open no matter how many times I shut it. When I was a kid, I would wake up in the night and find it just like that, waiting in the dark. I stepped forward. Something shifted inside. I wasn't alone in the room. My stomach clenched. I reached for the closet handle. Then the bedroom door slammed shut behind me. I whipped around. The hallway was gone. The walls wrong. The wallpaper was older now, peeling and stained. The air smelled of dust and something rotting. I turned back to the closet. The door was wide open. And inside, sitting on the floor, was me, a child. My younger self, knees pulled to his chest, wide eyes staring. I stepped back, my breath caught in my throat. His lips moved. You shouldn't have come back. Then, something moved behind him, a shape in the darkness, tall, watching, and smiling. The lights went out. The room breathed, and the house remembered me. Darkness swallowed the room. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the thick, suffocating blackness pressing in from all sides. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, my breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. Then, a whisper. You left me here. The voice was my own. I turned toward the closet, but I couldn't see anymore. Couldn't tell where the walls ended or where the shadows began. The air was colder now, thick with dust and something old. A shuffle. Soft, bare feet on wood. You left me. Something touched my arm. I jerked back, slamming into the bedroom door. My hand scrambled for the knob, but it wasn't there. Just smooth, cold wood. My breathing turned ragged. The house had changed again. Then, a faint glow. From the closet. I didn't want to look. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to close my eyes, to run, to fight. But I was trapped. The glow flickered, like candlelight. And then, slowly, my younger self stepped forward. His face was pale, his eyes too wide, too hollow. He looked wrong, like something had pulled him from a dream and left pieces of him behind. He held something in his small hands. A photo frame. He lifted it toward me. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I reached for it. The second my fingers touched the glass, everything shifted. The house groaned. The walls pulled away, and suddenly, I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I was in the past. The house as it had been 20 years ago. The walls fresh, the air warm. My mother's soft humming echoed from downstairs. And I was watching my own family leave. My father grabbed bags, rushing to the car. My mother pulled me and my brother by the hands, her face pale, her eyes filled with fear. "We have to go," she whispered. "Now." Little me didn't understand. He fought her grip, looking over his shoulder, at the top of the stairs, at something watching. A shadow, tall and thin, its face hidden in the dim light. I tried to scream, to move, but I was just a spectator. I watched as we left, as the front door slammed shut behind us, as the house shuddered, and as the thing at the top of the stairs turned toward me. It saw me, it remembered me, and now, it wanted me back. The past shattered like glass. I hit the floor of my old bedroom, gasping for breath. The room was wrong again, rotten, decomposed, and the closet door, it was wide open. A whisper crawled out from inside. "You never really left." Hands reached out for me and pulled me back in. The hands pulled me into the closet. Cold, thin fingers wrapped around my arms, dragging me into the darkness. I fought, kicked, clawed, gasped for air, but the space around me wasn't a closet anymore. It was something deeper, something waiting. The air smelled of dust and rot. The walls groaned, stretching, closing, breathing. The space around me expanded into a tunnel, the wood beneath me fading into something damp and soft, like earth that had never seen sunlight. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Something coming closer. A flickering glow lit the tunnel ahead. A figure stepped forward, small, familiar. My younger self. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. He clutched the photo frame to his chest, his lips trembling. "You left me here," he whispered. I shook my head, stepping back. No, I didn't. We left the house. We all left." His head tilted, slow, unnatural. "Not all of us." The shadows behind him moved. A shape rose from the darkness, towering, unfolding into something wrong. Its body was too thin, its arms too long, its head almost brushing the ceiling. The glow flickered, casting shadows across its face. No, not its face, because there wasn't one. Just smooth, empty skin where features should have been. It lowered its head toward me, tilting slightly, as if studying me. Then, it smiled. Not with a mouth. With the house itself. The walls shuddered. The tunnel groaned. And I suddenly understood. The house remembered me, because I had never truly left. A piece of me had always been here. And now it wanted the rest. The shadows lurched forward. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran, my feet pounding against the ground, the tunnel twisting and stretching around me. The walls breathed, pulsing in and out, the whispers crawling up from the dark. "Stay. You belong here. Come home." The tunnel suddenly ended. I burst through a door, and I was back in the house. But something was wrong. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. The furniture sat covered in dust. The air was thick, suffocating. The house was rotting from the inside out. And then I saw it, a photo on the wall. A new one. I stepped closer, my stomach twisting. My fingers trembled as I lifted the frame. It was me, standing right where I was right now. And behind me, the shadow, watching, smiling. I turned around. The hallway was empty, but I wasn't alone. The house remembered me, and it was never letting me go. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. The house was changing around me, the walls shifting, the floor stretching beneath my feet. The hallway twisted into something wrong. Too long, too dark, as if the house was pulling me deeper inside. My breath came in ragged gasps. My legs ached, but I kept running, turning corner after corner, searching for the front door. I found it, but it was different. Not the door I had walked through when I first came back. This one was older, cracked and warped, like it had been here for decades without being touched. I grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. I yanked harder. Nothing. Behind me, a creak. Slow. Deliberate. I turned and my stomach dropped. The hallway was gone. In its place stood a room I had never seen before. A bedroom, dust-covered. furniture draped in old sheets. A single chair stood in the middle facing the window, and someone was sitting in it. My chest tightened. I stepped closer, even though everything inside me screamed not to. The person in the chair. It was me, older, pale, lifeless. My head was tilted to the side, my hands resting on my lap, as if I had been sitting there for years. A photo frame rested on the table beside the chair. I reached for it, my fingers trembling. It was a picture of me standing at the front door. The same door I had just tried to open. The same door that wouldn't let me leave. The house had already taken me. I stumbled backward. My breathing turned shallow. The room darkened, shadows creeping in from the corners. The walls groaned. Then, a whisper. You were always meant to come back. I spun around, heart hammering. The shadow stood in the doorway, tall, watching, smiling without a face. The air pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. The walls shrank, closing in, the house breathing around me. Then I saw it, the mirror, hanging on the wall, reflecting something that wasn't there. In the mirror, the room was different, brighter, cleaner, and the door, the real front door, was open. I had one chance. I bolted toward the mirror, lunging at the glass. The house screamed. The walls buckled, and I fell through. I hit the ground outside. Sunlight burned my skin. Fresh air filled my lungs. The weight of the house vanished. I looked back. The house stood still and quiet, just as it had when I first arrived. No shifting walls, no twisted hallways. Just an old home at the end of the street. But in the window upstairs, a figure stood watching. Not the shadow. Not the thing that had followed me. It was me, staring back. Expression blank. Lips curved into a small, knowing smile. I didn't wait. I ran to my car and never looked back. The house is still for sale. I check the listing sometimes, even though I know I shouldn't. And every time there's a new photo. Picture of the front door. Slightly open. Waiting. It started with a whisper. At first, I thought it was just the house settling. Old pipes, shifting wood, things I could ignore. But then one night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. My name. A soft, rasping whisper, coming from inside the walls. I sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark. The only sound the hum of my ceiling fan. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I was half asleep. Then it came again. Come closer. I froze. The voice was muffled, buried deep inside the drywall. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wasn't dreaming. I turned on the light and stared at the wall. It looked normal, off-white, bare except for a single framed picture. My breathing was fast, uneven. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. I swallowed hard and forced myself to lie back down. I didn't sleep. The next morning I checked the wall. Knocked against it, listening for hollow spots. Nothing. But that night the whispering returned. Can you hear me? The voice was closer now. I sat up, staring at the wall. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Let me out. A cold wave of fear washed over me. My body refused to move. Then, a scratching sound. From inside the wall. Slow. Deliberate. Fingernails dragging against wood. I jumped out of bed and turned on every light in the room. The scratching stopped immediately. The whispering was gone. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. Something was inside my walls. Something that knew my name. I didn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The ticking of the clock, the faint hum of the fridge, the shifting of the old wooden beams. But nothing came from the wall. No whispers. No scratching. I told myself it was just my imagination. Stress. A trick of the mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was listening. The next day, I pulled my dresser away from the wall. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers over the surface. The paint was smooth, unbroken, except for one thing. In the corner just above the baseboard, scratches. Small, uneven, like fingernails had been dragged across the wood. A chill crawled up my spine. I traced the grooves, my stomach twisting. Then, a soft knock from inside the wall. I stumbled back, my pulse slamming against my ribs. I waited. Silence. Then, another knock. I didn't breathe. The air felt thick, heavy, pressing against my skin. I lifted my hand, slow, trembling, and knocked back. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a whisper. I knew you could hear me. My throat tightened. The voice was clearer now, closer. Too close. I turned and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. My legs shook as I leaned against the hallway wall, struggling to calm my racing heart. Then I heard it again. Not from my room. Not from the walls. But from inside the hallway itself. Why did you leave? The voice was right behind me. I ran. I ran down the hallway, my pulse hammering so hard it drowned out everything else. I didn't stop until I reached the living room, gasping for breath. My hands trembled as I flicked on every light. Silence. I turned in slow circles, my eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. Nothing moved, but I felt it. Something was here, listening, watching, waiting. I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but then I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, I think my walls are talking to me? They'd think I was losing it. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I hadn't been sleeping enough. Maybe. A soft knock echoed from the wall behind me. I whipped around. The living room wall. Smooth. Unbroken. But something was behind it. I swallowed hard and stepped forward. My fingers hovered over the surface. Then, another knock. My chest tightened. My legs screamed at me to run, but something inside me needed to know. I raised my hand and knocked back. A pause. Then, scratching. Slow, deliberate, crawling up the inside of the wall. Closer. Higher. Toward my ear. Then, a whisper. It's getting crowded in here. I jerked away, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My back hit the opposite wall. Then I heard something new. A thud. From inside the walls. Soft at first. Then again. And again. Like something was moving through them. No, not something. Someone. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and pressed my back against the counter, my knuckles white. Then, a groan of wood shifting, a crack, and a hole opened up in the living room wall. I froze. A dark gap, jagged and splintered, barely the size of a fist. The air shifted, colder now. Dust floated in the dim light. I stepped forward, heart pounding. I didn't want to look inside. I had to look inside. My fingers trembled as I reached out, touched the edge of the splintered hole, leaned in, and then I saw it. An eye, white, bloodshot, staring back at me. I screamed. The hole slammed shut. The house went silent. But I knew. Something was inside the walls. And it wasn't alone. I didn't move. Couldn't. The eye had been right there, staring through the hole before the wall closed on its own. The jagged edges were gone now, sealed like nothing had ever broken through. But I had seen it. Something, was inside my walls. My chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. My fingers dug into the countertop as I forced myself to breathe, to think. Then I heard it. Not a whisper, not a knock. Breathing. Slow, shallow, coming from inside the wall. I backed away, my stomach twisting. The house was too quiet now, like it was waiting for me to make the next move. My mind screamed, leave, get out, don't look back. But before I could even take a step toward the door, thud, a heavy impact from inside the walls, deep and forceful. Then another. Thud, 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 faster now. Panic filled the air. Whatever was inside, it was trying to get out. I bolted. I didn't stop until I was outside, slamming the door behind me. The night air hit my skin like ice. I stood on the porch, panting, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. I should have gotten in my car, driven away. But then, something moved in the upstairs window. I looked up. My bedroom. The light was off, but the moon cast just enough glow to show a shape. A figure, standing behind the glass, watching me. I knew without a doubt. It wasn't me. It wasn't human. And it had been inside the walls the whole time. A cold wave of terror ripped through me. My legs refused to move. Then the figure tilted its head and smiled. The window slammed shut on its own. The whisper came from behind me. "You should have stayed inside." I turned. The front door was wide open, and the house was waiting. The front door yawned open like a mouth, waiting. I stepped back, my breath coming fast and shallow. My body screamed at me to run, to get as far away as possible. But then I heard it. A voice, my voice, "Help me," came from inside the house, from inside the walls. I choked on air. No, that wasn't real. Couldn't be. Then the walls shifted. Not just inside. I could see them moving from outside, the wooden beams bending, stretching, the entire house breathing. Like something inside was pressing against it, trying to get out. I turned. My car was just a few feet away. I could run, I could leave. But what if someone was trapped? What if that voice really was me? I should have run. Instead, I stepped back inside. The door slammed shut behind me. Darkness swallowed the house. The walls groaned, stretching, curling inward. The air thickened, damp and heavy, pressing against my skin. Then I heard the scratching again. Deep, close, surrounding me. And then, the first scream, muffled, warped, came from the wall beside me. Then another, and another. Dozens of voices, screaming from inside the walls. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. My skin went cold. The whispers, the knocks, the breathing, they were never alone. They were all trapped inside. The floor beneath me buckled. I fell, my hands slamming against the rotting wood. Then, a hand shot out from the wall. Pale, thin, fingers clawing at the air. A second hand pushed through. Then a face. A human face, twisted in silent agony, stretching through the wall like it was made of cloth. The mouth opened, but the only sound was a low, wet gasp. Then another face appeared, and another. Their bodies were inside the walls, buried in them, still alive. I scrambled backward, my pulse a frantic drum in my ears. My body screamed, "Move, run, get out." But then, a hand grabbed my ankle. I shot through my veins. I kicked hard, breaking free, running for my life. The voices screamed, begging me to stay, to listen, to join them. I tore the front door open and threw myself outside. The second my feet hit the porch, the house went silent. I turned. The front door was gone. No entrance. No windows. Just solid, unbroken walls. The house had sealed itself shut. Like nothing had ever been inside. Like it had never let me in at all. I stumbled back. My entire body shook. Then, a whisper. From inside the walls. "We'll wait." I never went back. But sometimes at night when I close my eyes, I still hear them. Scratching. Whispering. Waiting. And I know. The house remembers me. And someday it will call me home again. I had never lived in a smart home before. The house itself was old Victorian, creaky, filled with history. But the previous owners had renovated everything, installing smart locks, voice-controlled lights, a high-end security system with motion sensors and cameras in every room. It was a strange mix of past and future, but I liked it. First, the first few nights were quiet. I'd settle into bed, whisper, "Lights off," and the room would fade to black. The security system would arm itself with a soft beep. Everything was perfect. Then, on the fourth night, something changed. I woke up at 2:33 a.m. The bedroom light was on. I blinked, disoriented. I was sure I had turned it off. I mumbled, "Lights off," and after a pause, they obeyed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I checked my phone. No notifications, no alerts from the security system. Still, unease curled in my stomach. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft, muffled, coming from the hallway speaker. "Is he awake?" My entire body went rigid. The house was empty. I lived alone. The lights flickered back on. I sat up, my breath coming fast. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Who's there?" The speaker hissed with static. Then, "He can hear us." The motion sensor in the hallway pinged. Someone was out there. I reached for my phone, pulling up the security feed. The hallway camera loaded, grainy in the dim light. The motion sensor had gone off right outside my bedroom door. But the hallway was empty. I swallowed hard. My fingers hovered over the emergency call button. Then, a new voice. Deeper. Wrong. Check the cameras. The feed glitched. The screen went black. Then, a single line of text appeared. "There is someone in the house." I heard footsteps outside my door, and the bedroom lock clicked open. The bedroom lock clicked open. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the door, my body frozen, my mind screaming at me to move, hide, run. But I couldn't. The house was watching me. The security feed on my phone was dead. The motion sensors were going off in every room at once. My smart home system was hacked, or worse, hijacked by something that wasn't human. Then, in the silence, a voice came through the speaker inside my bedroom. "Come out." Couldn't breathe. Then, a slow, deliberate footstep just outside the door. I scrambled off the bed, backing into the farthest corner of the room. My hands shook violently as I opened the security app again, praying it would work. The camera feed flashed back on. The hallway was empty, but something was wrong. The feed had changed. At the top of the screen, where the timestamp should have been, there were words instead. "Look again." The screen flickered, and then I saw it. A figure, standing right outside my bedroom door. Not moving, not breathing, just standing there, its head tilted toward the camera. My blood turned to ice, then turned its head toward me. Not the camera. It was looking at me through the screen. The light in my room flickered violently, throwing jagged shadows across the walls. The smart speaker crackled. Then a whisper, so close it felt like it was inside my head. "Let me in." The bedroom door swung open on its own. I saw nothing, but I felt something step inside. I ran. Straight through the door, past whatever stood there, down the hallway, past the flashing security sensors, the glitching cameras, the flickering lights. The front door wouldn't open. I screamed at the smart lock, "Unlock the door!" A beat of silence. Then, a voice that wasn't mine responded. "Not yet." Every light in the house went out, and something grabbed my wrist. The grip on my wrist was ice cold. Not a human touch. Not flesh. Something else. I ripped my arm away, stumbling backward into the pitch-black house. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. My smart home had turned against me. The security system was useless. The locks wouldn't open. The lights wouldn't stay on. And something was inside with me. Then, from the smart speaker, a voice. My own voice. "Where are you going?" My stomach dropped. I turned toward the sound, but the darkness swallowed everything. I grabbed my phone, fumbling with the flashlight. It wouldn't turn on. Then the TV screen flickered to life. Static. Warped images. Then, footage of me, walking through the house. But I wasn't holding my phone. I wasn't looking at the camera. I wasn't even aware I was being recorded. A low, distorted voice hummed through the speakers. "We've been watching you." The footage changed. More clips of me, brushing my teeth, sitting at my desk, sleeping. Each video from a different angle, from cameras that shouldn't exist. My throat went dry. Then the footage changed again. The screen showed my bedroom. Right now, someone was standing inside it. A figure tall and wrong, its face blurred out like a corrupted image. Stood near the bed, facing the camera, still waiting. Then, turned its head toward me, as if it knew I was watching. The TV shut off. The smart speaker whispered, "Come back upstairs." A floorboard creaked above me. Something was moving toward the stairs. I had seconds. I ran to the kitchen, yanking drawers open, looking for a knife, a weapon, anything. But the drawers were empty. The voice laughed softly through the speaker. "You don't need those." I bolted for the back door, slamming my fists against the smart lock. "Open the door." No response. Then, a different voice. A new voice. Something deep and wrong. "It's already open." A click. The lock disengaged. I didn't stop to think. I yanked the door open and ran into the night. The house went silent behind me. No flickering lights. No voices. Just cold, dark stillness. I sprinted to my car, shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. The headlights flared on, and in that brief second, I saw it. A figure standing in the upstairs window. Watching me, it raised a hand. The motion sensors inside the house pinged again. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification. I pulled it out with numb fingers. New device connected to your smart home system. My vision blurred with terror. The system was still online, and I wasn't in the house anymore, which meant something else was. My fingers went numb as I stared at the notification. New device connected to your smart home system. I wasn't in the house anymore. So what was? A slow, sickening dread curled inside me. I gripped the steering wheel with shaking hands, my breath coming fast and shallow. My entire body screamed at me to drive, to get away. But I couldn't move, because my phone screen changed. A live feed. The security camera inside my house had turned back on. The image was grainy, glitching, but I could still see it. A figure standing in the hallway. Not moving. Not breathing. Just watching. My stomach twisted into knots. It was facing the front door. Then slowly, too slowly, turned its head, looking directly at the camera. Looking directly at me. The screen flickered. Then, a new text appeared. You left the door open. Cold panic shot through me. I turned, my heart slamming against my ribs. The house loomed behind me, dark and silent. But the back door was open. Not just unlocked. Wide open. The night air barely moved past the threshold. The space beyond it was pitch black, swallowing everything. And standing just inside the doorway, a shape, no features, no details, just a shadow in the shape of a person. Watching me, waiting. I gasped, fumbling to put the car into gear, my fingers slipping against the wheel. The moment my foot slammed on the gas, my phone vibrated again. I didn't want to look, but I did. One final message. Don't worry, we're still connected. Then, every light in my house turned back on. The front door slammed shut. The back door swung closed. And the figure was gone. I drove away that night. I didn't stop. I didn't even think. I left everything behind. My furniture, my clothes, my entire life. I wiped my phone. Disconnected everything. But sometimes, at night, my phone still vibrates. No number. No contact. Just a message. You can't disconnect from US. And I know. The house is still watching. And so is whatever I let in.